The wind stirred dust across the wide main street of Dry Creek, a frontier town nestled between scorched hills and miles of open sky. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across wooden storefronts and broken signs. A stagecoach rattled to a stop near the post office. No one rushed to greet it. Inside, a young woman sat clutching a small travel bag in her lap. Her gloves were thin, her bonnet slightly frayed, and her face, though lovely, was tense with fear. Her name was Clara Whitmore, and she had traveled over 800 miles from Ohio to become a wife. Only no one had come for her. The stage driver cleared his throat awkwardly as he unloaded her modest trunk. "This is it, miss. Dry Creek. You sure this is the place?" Clara stepped down slowly, her boots crunching in the dirt. "Yes," she said softly, looking around. "This is where Mr. Jasper Dunn lives. He was to meet me." The driver rubbed the back of his neck. "I ain't seen Jasper in days. Folks say he's gone up to Dakota to chase silver. Didn't mention nothin' about a bride." Clara's heart sank. "But he sent letters." The driver gave a shrug of pity. "You'll find out soon enough. Good luck, miss." And with that, the coach rattled off, leaving Clara alone on the dusty street with nothing but a trunk, a suitcase, and a promise that had already begun to unravel. By mid-afternoon, word had spread. The women in town whispered behind hands, the men stared too long, and the children giggled at the stranger in the lace bonnet. Clara sat on a bench near the apothecary, clutching her hands, unsure what to do next. Her last coin was in her glove. Her only contact had vanished, and no one offered help until he stepped out of the shadows. He was tall, dressed in worn black. A wide-brimmed hat cast a shadow across his face. His boots were dusty, his belt carried a gun, but it was his silence that made people nervous. They called him Weston Hale. No one knew where he came from. He spoke little, and when he did, it was mostly in nods or simple gestures. He wasn't cruel, but he wasn't friendly either. Clara had seen him briefly from the corner of her eye when she arrived. He hadn't stared or smirked like the others. And now he was standing in front of her. He reached down, gently lifted her trunk, and motioned for her to follow. "Wait, sir," she said, standing quickly. "Where are we going?" He didn't speak, just tipped his hat and nodded toward the quiet end of town. She hesitated. "Why are you helping me?" Still no answer, but something in his eyes, cool, calm, steady, told her more than words ever could. She followed. He led her to a small two-room cabin behind the livery stable. It looked abandoned, but it wasn't falling apart. He opened the door, stepped aside, and placed her trunk gently near the bed. Still silent, Clara looked around. This place... He reached for a piece of paper and pencil from the table and wrote, "It's yours for now, safer than the street." She read the words, blinking hard. "But I don't even know your name." He wrote again slowly, "Weston Hale. Don't worry, I don't want anything." Clara folded the note, trembling. "Thank you." He tipped his hat again and walked out. That night, Clara sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the small flame of the lantern Weston had left for her. She was alone, but for the first time that day, she didn't feel entirely abandoned. There was still one man in Dry Creek who didn't speak much, but somehow he heard her. Clara awoke to the sound of roosters crowing and wagon wheels creaking in the distance. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then the ache returned. the tight knot in her chest, the hollow spot where hope used to sit. She rose slowly, wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, and looked around the little cabin Weston Hale had given her. It was humble, but clean. Someone had even left a fresh loaf of bread on the table. She hadn't heard anyone come in. A slip of paper was tucked beneath the crust. For now, no charge, you'll need strength. His handwriting was neat, firm, like him. Outside, Dry Creek was already buzzing, though Clara could feel the hush when she stepped into the street. The townsfolk didn't speak to her. Some looked away. Others looked right through her. She walked slowly toward the mercantile, the last coin in her glove pressing against her palm like a question she didn't want to ask. Inside, the shopkeeper gave her a look that hovered between suspicion and judgment. "Looking for work, are you?" he asked. Clara nodded. "I'm not here to cause trouble, sir. I need something to do. Anything." He sighed. "The boarding house already turned you away. So did the seamstress. Nobody's looking for help, least not from a woman come here with no husband." Clara's voice cracked. "I was promised—" "You were fooled," he said bluntly. "Dry Creek doesn't take kindly to being made a laughingstock." Clara blinked. "I didn't make anyone—" The door creaked behind her. Footsteps, slow and steady. The shopkeeper paled as Weston Hale entered, his tall figure cutting through the space like a blade. He didn't speak, just stood behind Clara and looked at the man. The shopkeeper's voice dropped. "She's with you?" Weston didn't nod, didn't shake his head. He simply placed $2 silver on the counter. "For the lady," he said in a low, quiet voice. Then he turned and left. Outside, Clara caught up with him. "You didn't have to do that." He glanced at her, not breaking stride. "Why are you helping me?" she asked again. He stopped, reached for the pencil in his coat, and handed her a folded note instead. She unfolded it slowly. "Because I know what it means to be misunderstood and alone." Clara looked up at him. "You don't seem like someone people ignore." Weston looked past her toward the hills. "They don't ignore me. They fear me. That's worse." That evening, Clara returned to the little cabin with a small bag of flour and beans. She made a simple meal and sat by the window, watching the street. Weston sat across the way on an old bench, sharpening a blade, watching nothing in particular. He didn't look at her window, but he stayed there until her lamp went out. The next morning she found a note tucked under the door. "I heard Miss Lorna at the apothecary might need help sorting herbs. You could ask." No name, no signature, but she smiled all the same. Clara wasn't part of the town yet, not really, but she had one ally, a man who said almost nothing and spoke everything she needed to hear. Clara approached the apothecary with cautious hope. The wooden sign creaked above her as she stepped into the cool, herb-scented shop. Glass jars lined the walls, each filled with dried flowers, roots, powders, and things Clara didn't recognize. Behind the counter stood a stern, silver-haired woman in a forest green apron, Miss Lorna Carver. Without looking up, Lorna said, "If you're here for a remedy, you'll need to speak clear. My hearing's gone half with age." Clara cleared her throat. "Actually, I heard you might need help." Lorna finally looked up. Her eyes narrowed. "You're the girl, the mail-order bride who got stood up." Clara's spine straightened. "Yes, ma'am, that's me." At least you don't deny it." Lorna folded her arms. "You ever worked with roots, tinctures, oils?" "I've made soap And I know lavender from sage, Clara said carefully. Lorna's eyes scanned her like a scale weighing worth. Then she nodded. I'll not pay much, a few coins a week and a warm lunch. Clara's breath caught. That's more than I expected. You'll start now, Lorna said, already turning away. By midday, Clara was grinding chamomile blossoms and bundling peppermint leaves with twine. Her hands remembered the rhythm from her childhood, her mother's herb garden, now just a memory behind fog. Miss Lorna didn't say much, but she watched. And after a while her tone softened. You've got good fingers for the work, she muttered. Not clumsy. Clara smiled faintly. Thank you. And don't pay no mind to what folks say, Lorna added. They're just looking for someone easier to gossip about than themselves. Later that evening, Clara walked back toward the cabin, her skirts brushing the grass. The air smelled of sagebrush and smoke. Her hands were stained with lemon balm and ink from the labels she'd written. She felt tired, but it was the good kind, the kind that came from being useful. At the door of her cabin, she paused. A small paper-wrapped bundle rested on the stoop. Inside, fresh jerky, 2 hard biscuits, and a note. Heard you had a long day, Weston. Her heart caught in her chest. He rarely signed anything, but this time he had. Across the street, Weston stood beneath the awning of the livery stable, arms crossed, watching, not staring, just making sure. Clara stepped outside and waved, unsure if he'd acknowledge it. He tipped his hat once, just once, then walked away into the growing dusk. The next day, townsfolk noticed something strange. Miss Carver was letting the bride behind the counter. She wasn't just tolerated, she was trusted. And whether they liked it or not, Clara Whitmore was not leaving. And the man who never spoke unless it mattered was the reason she had a voice at all. Dry Creek didn't change overnight, but it began to shift in small, almost invisible ways. Clara showed up to the apothecary every morning with her hair pinned and sleeves rolled. She learned the difference between valerian and wild licorice, measured herbs by hand, and listened closely when Miss Lorna spoke about cough syrups, poultices, and the way people could be healed by care, not just cure. Children started peeking in through the windows again. A few brave souls even came inside. Not for remedies, just to see her. One morning, as Clara stacked jars on the shelf, she caught her reflection in the glass. She didn't look like the woman who had stepped off the stagecoach weeks ago, tired, dust-covered, uncertain. This woman was steady, still healing, still unsure where life was leading her, but stronger now. Men like Weston Hale don't help people for no reason, Miss Lorna said suddenly, not looking up from her ledger. Clara blinked. Excuse me? You heard me, Lorna muttered. That man's carried silence like a badge for years, ever since that thing in Abilene. Clara paused. What thing? Lorna glanced at her. You don't know? Clara shook her head. The older woman closed the ledger softly. Then maybe it's not mine to tell. That afternoon, Clara found herself walking toward the edge of town. Her feet carried her down the trail past the stable, past the grain silo, to a quiet patch of land by the river where the cottonwoods swayed in soft rhythm. There, sitting on an overturned crate, with a harmonica resting in his hands, was Weston. He didn't startle when she approached. He simply nodded. Clara sat beside him. I don't know what happened in Abilene, she said softly, and you don't have to tell me. But I wanted you to know You've helped me more than anyone ever has." He stayed still, then offered her the harmonica. "I don't play," she whispered. He gestured gently. "Try." Clara took it and held it in her lap. "Why me?" she asked. "Why help someone the whole town turned their back on?" Weston looked ahead at the river. Then, slowly, he reached into his coat and took out a worn envelope. Inside was a single photo, black and white, faded from the sun. A woman smiling, holding a child. "My sister," he said quietly, "and her boy." Clara blinked. It was the first time she'd heard him speak more than a sentence. "They came west with a promise, same as you. The man left her after a week, said she didn't fit in." Clara swallowed hard. "What happened to them?" Weston's jaw clenched. "She left town humiliated. I never found her again." Clara held the photo gently. "So you helped me because no one helped her." He nodded once, then stood. Before leaving, he spoke again. "You're not her, but you deserve better." That night, Clara lit a single candle and sat at the table with her journal open. She wrote 3 words on the page, over and over as tears touched the ink. "I am worthy." And for the first time, she believed it. Days turned into weeks, and Dry Creek began to shift in ways no one had expected. It started small. A nod from the general store clerk, a polite good morning from the baker's wife, children waving as Clara passed. No one dared say it out loud, but it was clear. She was no longer the town's embarrassment. People began to see her not as the mail-order bride who got stood up, but as the capable woman who worked at the apothecary, knew the difference between a fever and an infection, and treated everyone with kindness, even those who hadn't earned it. And behind it all, always watching, always quiet, was Weston Hale. One cold morning, a rider galloped into town with dust and urgency in his wake. His name was Merritt Clive, and trouble followed him like a shadow. He pulled his horse short in front of the saloon and stepped down, spurs clinking, eyes scanning the street with a sneer. "Where's that gunman?" he called out. "Where's Weston Hale?" Weston stepped into the light from under the stable awning, his stance still, unreadable. Merritt grinned. "Heard you turned soft, Hale. Heard you're playing nursemaid to a woman who couldn't even keep a husband." Whispers rolled through the bystanders. Clara, who had just stepped out of the apothecary, froze in place. Weston said nothing. He didn't draw. He didn't blink. He simply stepped forward, put himself between Merritt and Clara, and stood there, silent, unmoving, undeniable. Merritt narrowed his eyes. "Still don't talk much, do you?" Weston kept his voice low. "Leave." "You gonna make me?" Weston tilted his head slightly. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. Merritt spat on the ground, turned back toward his horse, and muttered something Clara couldn't hear. But the message was clear. Weston didn't raise his voice, because he didn't need to. That night, Clara knocked on the door of Weston's cabin. One room, sparse and neat, just like the man himself. He opened it, surprised. She held a wrapped plate in her hands. "Stew. Thought maybe you'd eat something warm tonight." He stepped aside and let her in. She sat at the small table while he set the plate down gently, then pulled out the same pencil and paper she'd seen before. He scribbled something and slid it toward her. "You don't owe me anything." Clara looked at the note, then at him. "I know," she said. "That's why I'm here." They didn't talk much, just sat together, ate in comfortable silence. When she stood to leave, Weston followed her to the door. She hesitated, then looked up at him. "I'm not afraid anymore." Weston didn't smile, but his eyes softened. "Neither am I," he said. And for two people who had lost everything before ever finding each other, that was more than enough. For now. Spring crept into Dry Creek like a whisper, soft rains, thawed soil, green peeking through brown. Clara's herb shelves at the apothecary were blooming with color. Bundles of lavender, mint, and yarrow hung drying near the window. And for the first time since she arrived, the people of the town no longer just tolerated her, they welcomed her. A mother came in asking for a teething remedy. A widow brought her a pie just because. Even the schoolteacher, once tight-lipped with judgment, now nodded politely when they passed on the street. Clara had earned every bit of respect, not by loud speeches or demanding it, but by showing who she truly was, day by day. Miss Lorna took notice. "You changed things," she said one afternoon while slicing willow bark. "You, girl, not just Weston, not just pity, you." Clara smiled faintly. "I didn't do it alone." "No," Lorna admitted, "but it's easier to follow someone who walks tall with their chin up and their boots steady." That evening, Weston knocked softly on Clara's cabin door. He had never done that before. She opened it, surprised to see he wasn't wearing his usual black coat. Instead, a simple shirt, sleeves rolled, collar dusted with trail wind. He held something in his hand, a package wrapped in worn brown paper. He handed it to her without a word. Inside, a new pair of gloves, soft leather, the stitching careful, almost nervous. Clara's eyes welled. "Weston, I don't need gifts." He shook his head and finally spoke. "Not a gift," he said, "a gesture." "A gesture for what?" He looked at her, expression guarded, voice low. "For everything you are. For everything I'm not sure how to say." She stepped back, heart thudding softly. "You don't have to speak everything. Sometimes being beside someone says enough." Weston exhaled, then handed her a second paper, folded neatly like something written and rewritten too many times. She opened it slowly. "I never thought I deserved peace, not after what I lost, but somehow you brought it, without asking, without demanding, just by being here." Her throat tightened. She looked up at him, tears in her eyes. "I've never belonged anywhere," she whispered, "until now." He didn't reach for her. He didn't kiss her, but he nodded, softly, reverently, as if her words had echoed something deep inside him that hadn't had light in years. That night, Weston didn't return to his own cabin. He sat on the bench outside Clara's door, just sitting, guarding, listening to the wind. And when the sun rose over Dry Creek the next morning, it found two people, not broken, not rescued, but healed side by side. Slowly, silently, steadily. Dry Creek hadn't seen a town gathering in months. But when news spread that the old schoolhouse was reopening with a new roof and volunteers were needed to help clean, something remarkable happened. People showed up, and so did Clara. She wore her apron, tied her hair back, and scrubbed desks beside widows and ranch hands who once turned their backs on her. The same women who used to whisper about her in church pews now stood beside her, bucket in hand, talking about seed orders and the coming harvest. No one said the word bride anymore. They just said Clara, and that to her meant everything. Weston arrived late, as he always did. He didn't speak, didn't explain, just started repairing the shutters without being asked. The children followed him like shadows, fascinated by his quiet strength. Clara watched from a distance as he gently lifted a boy to reach a windowsill. She smiled. Later, she brought him a tin of lemon water, still cool. "You keep showing up," she said softly. He took the tin, nodded. Clara looked at the children still chasing each other in the yard. "They like you." He shrugged. "They like dogs, too." Clara laughed, a real easy sound that she hadn't known she was capable of until Dry Creek started to feel like hers. "You're not a dog, Weston." He glanced sideways at her. "Maybe a wolf," she added with a grin. That evening, as the sun dipped and folks walked home, Miss Lorna approached Clara with a folded newspaper from Casper. "You'll want to read this," she said. Clara opened it. Her eyes scanned the front page, then froze. There, tucked under a column titled "Western Criminals and Drifters Wanted or Watched," was a small sketch, and beneath it, Weston Hale, former deputy, involved in Abilene standoff, not charged, still under suspicion by some. Clara's breath caught. Miss Lorna looked at her. "You didn't know?" "No," Clara whispered, "but I don't think it changes anything." "You sure?" Clara folded the paper slowly. "Yes," she said. "He saved me from a different kind of lawlessness, the kind that hides behind polite smiles and silent judgment. I don't care about a line in a paper. I care about the man who shows up when no one else will." That night, Clara waited by her cabin door. Weston approached from the stables, quiet as dusk. "You saw it?" he asked. "I did." "Do you want me gone?" She stepped forward, looked him straight in the eye. "No. Do you?" He didn't answer, so she reached for his hand, and this time he didn't pull away. In the silence between them, something unspoken settled into place. Not a romance of flowers and declarations, but a bond rooted in something steadier, trust earned, pain shared, and a future neither of them ever expected to want. The next few weeks passed quietly, but the kind of quiet that spoke of healing, not avoidance. Clara continued her work at the apothecary. Weston kept repairing what others ignored: broken fences, loose boards, stray animals wandering too close to town. He did it without asking, without waiting for thanks. People noticed, and though no one came right out to say it, Dry Creek was changing because of them. One Sunday morning, Clara stepped out of her cabin in a simple blue dress. The hem was mended, the lace collar ironed flat. She'd never worn anything new in Dry Creek, but she'd never needed to. What she wore now was confidence. She walked through the church doors and took a seat near the front pew. The whispers started, but they were softer now, less like judgment, more like curiosity. When Weston stepped in behind her moments later, hat in hand, quiet as snowfall, the whispers stopped. He sat beside her, in plain view, in the house of God, and no one dared say a thing. After the service, the preacher's wife approached Clara near the steps. Her smile was cautious, but kind. "You've found your place here," she said softly. Clara nodded. "Took me a while to believe I deserved one." The woman glanced over Clara's shoulder to where Weston stood, talking quietly with the blacksmith. "He helped you." Clara smiled gently. "We helped each other." Later that evening, Weston stood on Clara's porch, hands in his coat pockets, staring up at the stars. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked. Clara folded her arms. "I used to, almost every night when I first got here." "And now?" She looked at him. "Now I think about staying." "What about you?" Weston didn't answer immediately. Then, "I've never stayed anywhere longer than a few months since Abilene." Clara tilted her head. "Why this time?" He turned to her slowly. Because it's the first place that ever forgave me without asking me to forget. She stepped closer. And the first place that saw more than your silence. Their hands brushed. Clara's voice was barely a whisper. You've done more for me than I could ever repay. I don't want repayment. What do you want, Weston? His voice was quiet but firm. You, here, just like this. The night breeze swept around them gently. It wasn't a grand confession, no dramatic kiss under moonlight. It was real, quiet, strong, just like them. Spring had softened into early summer. The hills outside Dry Creek wore a coat of green, the streams flowed fast, and the sky stretched wide and clean over everything that had once seemed impossible. Clara stood outside the apothecary, carefully placing fresh bundles of chamomile and thyme in a wooden crate. Her hands moved with calm confidence, her eyes steady. Behind her, Miss Lorna hummed as she labeled jars, more like a partner now than a boss. Across the street, Weston repaired the porch rail on the town hall. No one asked him to, no one needed to. He simply saw what needed fixing and fixed it. That's who he was. And now, finally, people were starting to say his name with something close to respect. That afternoon, as Clara walked toward the creek, carrying a basket of clean linens, a man she didn't recognize stepped into her path. Stranger, tall, clean-shaven, fancy boots, and a suit too fine for a place like Dry Creek. You Clara Whitmore? He asked. She nodded warily. Yes. He smirked. Thought so. I've been hired to find you. Jasper Dunn wants you to know he's back in Wyoming. Said you still owe him a name and a marriage. Clara's fingers tightened around the basket handle. He left me stranded. Yeah, well, he claims you were paid for, says you're still his bride. Behind them, footsteps approached. Firm, familiar. Weston! He stopped beside Clara, eyes fixed on the man. He didn't say a word. The stranger glanced sideways at him, shifting uncomfortably. You got something to say, mister? Weston slowly stepped forward, not fast, not threatening, but unmistakably firm. And then, just 5 words. She belongs to no one. The silence that followed was louder than any bullet. The man held up both hands. Easy now, no need for trouble, just delivering a message. Clara's voice rose, even as her hands trembled. You tell Jasper Dunn I'm not property. I didn't come here for chains. I came for a future. Weston turned to her, gaze steady, protective. She didn't need him to speak. He already had, by standing beside her. The man left town before sundown. That evening, Clara sat on Weston's porch, her hands still shaking slightly from the encounter. He handed her a cup of coffee, then sat beside her, silent. Thank you, she whispered. He shook his head. You didn't need saving. You just needed someone who wouldn't walk away. She looked at him, heart full. I don't think I want to live anywhere but here, Weston. He turned to her slowly. You don't have to, not ever. She paused. Then, with all the softness of a woman who'd found her strength, she reached for his hand. Then maybe it's time we built something together. Weston didn't reply with words. He simply held her hand tighter. And for the first time since the day she arrived in Dry Creek, Clara wasn't just surviving. She was home. The town gathered in the square under a sky painted with morning gold. A banner hung from the church railings, fluttering in the breeze. Founders' Day Festival, an annual tradition in Dry Creek, though few could remember the last time it had truly felt like something worth celebrating. But this year it was different. This year, the apothecary had fresh garlands in the windows. This year, the benches were full. Laughter returned, music too. And Clara Whitmore, once called an embarrassment, now helped organize the booths, the food tables, and even led the children's flower wreath contest. She wore her apron over a modest white dress and carried herself with quiet grace. The people didn't just nod now, they smiled, they waved. She'd won something greater than attention. She'd earned trust. Weston stood near the edge of the crowd, arms folded, hat in hand. He never liked attention, but people greeted him all the same, subtle nods, grateful looks. A blacksmith shook his hand. The mayor tipped his hat. He was no longer the ghost in the corner. He was part of this place, and that, to Weston Hale, was more than he ever thought he'd want again. Clara found him near the water pump just before noon. "You didn't sneak off," she said, smiling. He raised a brow. "You sound surprised." "I am. You hate crowds." "I don't hate you." Her cheeks colored faintly. "Good." Then she reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out a folded slip of paper. "I was going to give this to you later, but now feels right." He opened it slowly. Inside, a drawing of a cabin, 2 rooms, a porch, a little garden off to the side. Below it, in her careful handwriting, "Ours?" He looked at her. "You mean it?" She nodded. "I don't want a big house or a title. I just want peace, and you, and a place that's ours from the ground up." Weston tucked the paper into his coat pocket. "I'll build it." "Together," she added. "Together," he echoed. That evening, as the sky burned orange and the last notes of fiddle music floated over the fields, Weston took Clara's hand and walked her up the hill behind the chapel. No ring, no preacher, just sky, wind, and truth between them. "I'm not good with words," he said, voice rough with nerves. Clara smiled gently. "You've said more to me in silence than any man with 1,000 speeches. I can't promise I'll always know what to say." She squeezed his hand. "Then just stay beside me." And in that moment, under a sky full of stars, Weston Hale leaned in, not with urgency, not with fire, but with the steady calm of a man who had waited a lifetime to finally belong. Their first kiss was soft, certain, and in it was the answer to every question they'd ever been afraid to ask. Clara had come west for a husband. What she found was something far deeper, a voice in silence, a home in rough hands, and a love born not from perfection, but from patience, respect, and choosing each other day after day.